Hello, my friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to the month of May. I not gonna lie to you, it's a little bit kind of startling to think that basically we're at midpoint in the year, pretty much. Today is May 1st. Several things happened this week. I'm sure all of you have been in this sort of roller coaster of emotions that was the month of April. I was ready for that month to be over, to be honest. But I thank you because you're here supporting open source. And this is Open Source Friday. We have a special edition today. I am Andrea Griffiths, a Columbia dev in all places. And today we get to talk about my favorite month of the year. I think it is. It has to be. It's Maintainer Month. And what Maintainer Month is a month where the good folks of open source programs at GitHub take the time to create an amazing invite-only experience for maintainers, as well as spaces for all of you to learn more about your favorite open source projects and your favorite maintainers. And so we were going to have a ton of streams this month. I'm going to grab the link for our Maintainer Month website so that you can see the full calendar. If you bear with me, I will bring you the actual calendar so you can see there is a lot of streams this month. We have events besides the events that are happening regularly for Open Source Fridays, but we also have special edition events like the one today, where if we have either, this come from two places, either conversations that happen with maintainers from just being part of the maintainer ecosystem and just being awesome and always giving folks at GitHub feedback. And my guest today is actually no stranger and is a friend of GitHub and has been just very generous with his time in sharing what he knows. So it's pretty cool because we actually been able to invite him and ask him to sort of give us a rundown. He's actually doing this, but in a more intimate context for maintainers later on this month. But I want you to see the website. So this is a website, Maintainer Month website. And when you come here, you can click and see the entire schedule. Also, you have an option to subscribe to this calendar. So if you don't want to miss any of the events, which there's, like I said, events are plenty, right? Today, we're having two Open Source Fridays. At one, my colleague, Kadesha Kerr, is going to have the folks from Remotion. How cool is Remotion? Plus, all of our Robert Duck events, all of our Open Source Fridays, which are always focused on open source, but now we're going to have extra special events. So if you yourself have an event that you think should be part of this celebration, this is an open source project and you can contribute to it. So if you are scrolling through, we did a lot of aesthetic improvements to the site. And when I say we, I mean you good people with an excellent design taste actually help contribute to make the website better. So if you're looking for a project to contribute to, this is a good one. And if you're looking for submitting your own project to appear in this fantastic scheduling calendar, please submit a PR. So you have the website now. I will share it a little bit later as well. But thank you for being here. I'm going to welcome you all. Thank you so much, Jomoku. Appreciate you for being here. Good morning from Ethiopia. Amazing. Good morning, Farhan. Am I an AI? I am not. I wish, because then I will feel nothing. Then it wouldn't hurt my feelings when everything is on fire and we're all suffering. So it's not. Welcome. And then Ravi, this question about migrating source code from GitLab to GitHub with mirroring approach in organizational level. Oh my goodness. Actually, my colleague just published a guide that's very comprehensive for actions. But let me find you one before this is over. I'm going to put the bat signal out and get a colleague to go find one. So welcome, everyone. Welcome. So let's get into it because I think we have a lot to cover and I want to make sure that our guest gets the entire time that he deserves. So my guest today has been building AI agents before AI agents were like fancy. And his title is actually a really good representation of that. Nicholas Tindle is the founding AI engineer at AutoGPT. And if you haven't checked it out, it is one of the most starred repos in GitHub. I think it has over 180,000 stars. I might be wrong with my stat there, but correct me if I'm wrong. They were the first published example of a LLM powered AI agent before like the buzz were caught. And today we're going to talk, of course, about AutoGPT. Nicholas has been super generous and it's going to actually give us a demo. But we're also going to talk about what happens when AI agents start contributing to your repo, because we live in a completely different world now where contributions are both human and agentic, and we have to optimize for that. And AutoGPT is doing a fantastic job at that. So let me start by bringing Nicholas into the stage. Welcome, Nicholas. Nicholas, you had a rough night and you're here. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I had a very busy night. Didn't get a lot of sleep, but I'm glad to be here now. I'm glad to be on the pod. I'm glad to be chatting with y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, you are joining us from Texas. You work remote. You have been with AutoGPT a couple of months now. Well, a couple of months, a year.
A couple of years, yeah.
A couple of years now. And you've actually going to give this I guess a version of this into our more intimate gathering for maintainers, which is coming up next week. But I am so grateful that you were open to coming by Open Source Friday, because we talk a lot about projects and we share a lot about projects. And I think a big part of it is also being able to share our best practices and what projects are actually actively doing. So it's like open source for open source in open source. Very meta. So happy you're here. Thank you. Thank you. Before we get started into the topic, I do want to know a little bit more about AutoGPT. Like for those of us who maybe are newer to the project, can you tell us a little bit about what problem was AutoGPT was trying to solve and like how did it become a thing? And then I'm going to share the repository so we can get everyone in Open Source Friday to go there and get a star count to 200K today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of an interesting thing. AutoGPT wasn't actually trying to solve a problem at all. We started way before most of the other AI agents that you've heard of even existed. And our goal was just to see what happens when you put LLM in a loop. It started out as experiments. There's a bunch of different types of experiments we were running. And the first version, we call it Classic now. We've done a little bit of work to revive it a little bit and are starting to look at that. But Classic was like an experiment into what happens when you put an AI agent into a loop. Try and give it a plan and goals. And it kind of is the driving factor for what a lot of these agents like Claude Code or Copilot CLI became today. This was before the concept of an AI agent even existed, right? Like we talked a lot about legal things, and that's where a lot of the terms like agent came out of, is because of some of the legal discussions we had around like what kind of warnings do we have to put on this repo.
Yes.
It was crazy times, very different.
How the times have changed. I've shared the link to the repository, so I hope everyone can take a look, go by and take a look at it. But so AutoGPT is a repository that's like loved by contributors, right? You have a massive funnel of PRs.
Yeah, so many.
I mean, I don't know if you can share some of those numbers. I know people can look at the repo and kind of get
right now we have about 150 open.
That is wild.
Which is a significant amount of work to keep down. Just from internal and external contributors, we use a lot of agents of different varieties to do our work. Everything from GitHub's Copilot to Claude Code to Codex to our internal tools, right? Our Autopilot. We use a lot of agents and like manual coding still too, of course. And so we get a ton of PRs and we have to manage them, and we do that. And I'm going to tell y'all a little bit how we do it today.
Awesome. Right now, like I click on it and there is 144. And obviously like the speed in which you're getting these contributions is not slowing down. If anything, it's accelerating, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Before we get started on how you are taking the approach of reviewing these PRs and stuff, I think a lot of us are started kind of like build this muscle to know how a PR was submitted, if it was an agent or a human who wrote it. I don't know. You've been there since the beginning, since like before everyone had OpenClaw submitting all their PRs, or Claude Code was a thing, or the GitHub CLI was incredible. So like, I don't know how you've been handling that yourself personally in the maintainership. And then we can talk about like the more approaches, like the more technical things that you've done to like make it better for everyone.
Yeah, so for most of our team, it's actually pretty easy to tell when the code was written by a human, when it was written by a bot. We have a lot of things to make the bot written PRs good, but you can tell because they don't make spelling errors, for example. They don't deviate from the templates that we give them to the same degree, right? There's lots of things that a person will do that is taking liberties that an AI agent won't because of some of the rules we set up. We've also gotten really, really good at identifying LLM written text, just as a team, because we interact with them so much across so many different agents and so many different models. It's just, you can read it and go, human probably didn't write this. It doesn't sound like a developer. You know, most developers are not the best orators or writers. So,
oh my God, that is a telltale sign. Yeah. Yes. Like nobody is writing this dissertations every time they submit a PR. And some of these agentic generated things are definitely like that. So a lot of maintainers and a lot of projects are struggling with what to do because they don't want to silo, like they don't want to close the door. They don't want to say, well, realistically, I don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle, friends. Like, this is it. Okay. Short of like some kind of major event that just, I don't know, takes the infrastructure out of the loop and we're unable to actively do it. I don't think we can go back to the times where we were not using AI assistants and working with LLMs. So you and your project took a different approach to dealing with this type of PRs. Instead of just closing the PRs, right? You started doing things a little bit different to actually improve the quality of those instructions. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we had to do was identify what the problems were. We were noticing low quality contributions, but to us, low quality was a very hard thing to define, right? And it will be to most projects because there's so many different ways that PR can be low quality. For example, it could not have tests. It could have tests that are bad. It could not do the thing you want, or it could do the thing you want perfectly, but be unreadable code. Or it could have 3,000 comments, right? Like there's a ton of different ways it can be wrong. So we started off by identifying the things that really bothered us. Things like not enough tests, right? We ship a lot of code. You need to have tests, right? Tests that were wrong, right? That was something that was really bothering one of our front-end engineers. He spent a lot of time fixing up some tooling to make sure the tests we write are good. And then we also identified things that were not telling us why people were making changes. That was really bothering us. We were getting a lot of PRs that just had some code change without any real understanding of why, right? And we had a bunch of other smaller problems that we fixed along the way that I'll get into. But those were like the really big things. We need to identify what was going wrong. Because if you don't know what's wrong, you can't fix it, right? You got to have an engineering mindset for all this stuff. Once we know what was wrong, it was pretty easy to start fixing it, right? We started by identifying all the different tools people use, right? We looked at it and said, okay, a lot of people are using Claude Code. A lot of people are using Cursor. A lot of people are using Copilot. And a lot of people are using OpenClaw, right? So we tried to look into those tools and see what different ways those tools can take instructions, right? Almost all these tools take markdown files at various levels of the repo and read them, right? And they use that for instructions. Initially, we thought our docs were sufficient, but it turns out the tools aren't going to go read your docs unless they're told to. So no amount of updating our contributor guidelines or updating the docs pages was having any effect, right? We even have a whole wiki on our repo dedicated to how to work with our repo. But none of the AI agents were following that. So what we did was we found, we started with Claude. We made a bunch of Claude.md files.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the main contributor of spam, was people using Claude. And we knew that because every Claude PR has code contributed by Claude.
They all sound the same.
Right, exactly. So we added a bunch of Claude.md files and started using the tool ourselves, right? And started getting it to where whenever I asked it to add a feature, I was happy with the output it would make just by changing the markdown files, right? And putting them at various levels, learning that Claude will auto-read any markdown file for the folder it enters, right? we could control a lot of the behavior. So if it entered our backend folder, we told it how to start the backend. We told it, if you're going to change the backend, you need to write tests and get to 80% coverage. Here's how you check coverage, or your PR won't be accepted. Don't even open it. Right? There's a bunch of different things we did like that, small micro changes over time, where we got to the point where I, as a developer, could tell Claude, here's the feature I want to make. And Claude would go start writing it and discover on its own, here's the changes I need to make this compatible. AutoGPT uses like a block system, right, to add new features. For example, we may have blocks for posting to Reddit or Twitter, for example, right? And that was one of the biggest things we were getting, basically spam PRs for that were, or sloppy PRs, I'll say. PRs that were unmergeable because they weren't following the guides. Well, in that guide, we already had a really, really good documentation set up. And with Claude Markdown files, you can just reference that document file and it'll go read it as if it's in that location, right? So that was the first step we did, right? Was build a little box to teach it how to interact with our code. That worked okay, but only for Claude, right? Other tools like Copilot, which became much more popular, and Codex and OpenClaw started contributing. And we found that those tools ignored Claude files because they're not Claude. So we centralized to an agents.md and point all our Claude files to read that, right? And all of this is iterative over time. And you can go see on our repo all these random files littered around that have seemingly obscure instructions on how to work with them. But they're all instructions that were built off us using them and testing it until we got the output we liked, right? So we added that, and that was a really, really big improvement. Now we're getting agents to actually follow our rules around adding tests, making sure that they're implementing things correctly and avoiding problems. But we started realizing they don't know how to use the basic tools. Stuff like Vercel, right? And Next. And how do I do this pattern correctly? And our front-end engineer, Luis, was starting to get really annoyed that all these PRs were coming in. So what he did was he wrote a guide, and we added it to the repo as a skill. And every agent will go auto-discover this skill when it starts working in our repo. Whether it wants to or not, all of these harnesses, that's the term for like Claude Code, Copilot, Autopilot R's, will all just discover this, right? They don't, that's like their default behavior. They'll go learn see this skill. And we set up triggers in these skills as part of the skill's name, or part of the skill's description, which says, trigger this when you need to add front-end tests, or trigger this when you need to write back-end tests, with even more descriptions of what to do and what not to do. So for example, we wanted Storybook for certain types of components, right? Because we wanted to be able to validate it dynamically without having to run the entire front end. So as part of the front end thing, it says write a Storybook test if your component is in one of these folders. And now Luis is a lot happier because when he goes to run a PR from somebody, whether it's from me when I'm using Claude Code or Autopilot, or somebody outside, it's much higher quality, right? And you can put these files anywhere, and you should litter them extensively, but not make each individual one too long. Each of these tools behaves a little differently. So for Claude, for example, you can basically put as many of these things down as you want. Just put one per directory forever if you want, right? Go in every directory level down. It'll discover the ones that matter and not import the ones that don't. Ones that use agents.md, you have to tell it about the sub ones, right? So, hey, here's this file, but also these ones exist, right? That applies to tools like Codex, which don't do as much native discovery. And over time, we started seeing these things get their own contributions, right? As if they're like a separate part of our mono repo. Give me a second, I gotta take a drink.
Yeah, of course. Interesting. So it's like a system of sort of, I look at it like modularity, like progressive kind of disclosure, right? Where you're referencing files and sub-files from different places. And I guess that structure is important to help the agents actually find what they need to find. So that's a very interesting finding that you figure out what you should do in the agents at MD versus what makes sense more as a skill.
Yeah, that's a really big deal, more than you'd expect, because an agents.md file only happens in a certain directory.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if you're writing backend tests and you think about doing front end stuff, a skill may load dynamically, right? So if it's like, oh, we change this backend behavior, we need to make a front end test for it. It's not going to know what directory to go look in for an agent.md file, but the
Exactly.
skill can tell it that, right? And then it'll go check the right one without wasting a bunch of extra time, right? A lot of maintainers, I think, are treating AI tools as, how do I say this? Slop generically, right? But they don't have to be. It's basically somebody else paying for your compute if you set these things up right, you know? If they want to pay for Claude Code and contribute to our repo, they're more than welcome to. And if I set my skills up and my repo up correctly for this, it'll work really well, right? So we've done a lot of work, and now most contributions we get, we can just say, okay, this probably works, right? And we've built tools to validate that we'll probably get to in a little bit.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. And this is what I think, this is why like we really wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think a lot of us are like the immediate instinct is to say the door is shut and I'm not going to tax my team with reviewing all of these slop contributions. But the way you just put it is brilliant, because it's like, you want to use your tokens and your compute to come improve this project, go for it. But I'm going to make it so you're contributing in a way that makes sense for us. Fantastic. So tell me about some of the ways that, some of the tools that you created. So like creating the skills and the agents, and then I think that's constantly been growing and improving, right?
Yeah.
And then what were some of the other measures that you took to make sure that the way like the PRs were coming in, for example, made sense?
Yeah, so we made PR templates and used them extensively, and used them quite forcefully, to be blunt. We tell the agents if they don't follow the PR template, we're closing your PR. And the agents take that quite seriously, surprisingly. When they're being tasked with doing something, they care quite a lot. Caring is maybe not the right word. We're not going to get into an intention of AI right
Yeah,
now,
that's a whole other stream, friend.
yeah, I'd love to be back for that one. Just a little roundtable chat for that. But
yeah,
we've set it up so that the agents think if the PR does not follow this template exactly, we're going to close it automatically with zero hesitation, very like forcefully and angrily, right? So that means that agents follow the template, which is good and bad, right? It's good that we know that they will follow the template, right? And we're certain of it. It's bad in that people have stopped following the template because we can make the template really complicated, right? And the agents will still follow it. And you can see that a lot, and you can tell which agents are like capable by which ones get our template correct, right? So we don't actually close all these automatically. We have all the tooling to do so, but we decided that was not as required as just telling the agent that we will do it, it turns out. And you can do things like that, right? You can experiment and do changes and say, oh, actually, we don't need to do that. But yeah, we basically tell it, if you don't follow, we're just going to close it. And it will follow it. But people don't follow it because it's a really complicated template. But as a maintainer, I don't really mind that, because if you don't follow the template, I know you're probably a person and I'm going to be kinder. You know.
Fair. There is something that you put, like, I don't know, is it a trick? The test plan trick for your templates? Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so we require them to put a test plan, and this is kind of crazy. And in combination with some of the skills we have skills that one's called test PR. And as part of our test plan, it casually mentions testing the PR, which whenever it reads the template, it'll go, oh, I need to write a test plan. And by writing the test plan, it realizes it needs to load the skill that will test the PR. And to test the PR, what it does is it opens up your browser using Agent Browser, which is a tool that it'll go install with your permission, of course, right? We're not trying to install things on people's computers without their permission. It'll go and say, hey, I want to install Agent Browser to test this PR. And then it'll open up your browser and it'll launch the tooling and go, this PR doesn't work. We're not opening it because we failed to write the test plan, right? Because for us to look at the PR, it requires you to check all the boxes in the test plan. And an agent will go, okay, cool, I got to make a test plan, make the test plan. And then as it's making it, start testing it to say it did. And we've noticed that's decreased a lot of the bad PRs, right? We don't really get PRs that don't work anymore, so much as we get PRs that are maybe not aligned with what we want for our product, which is a lot harder to train. We've done some work on that, but I think that's something you kind of got to accept as open source, is just this person wants it to go a slightly different way than we do, and that's okay, right? But having the test plan makes it run it.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah, it reduces a lot of the sloppiness where it's just like, this doesn't work, right? Because, well, if it doesn't work, it's not going to open the PR, or it's going to keep iterating till it does, or it runs out of credits, which not my problem.
Hey, listen, and I think this is a purview of every single maintainer. Like, it's your project, you're maintaining it actively, it's your decision. So you want to complain and participate, you gotta make it so it makes sense for the project. And it shouldn't be personal, people. People get so upset. I hate it. And then there is like, we forget that there are actual real people. Like, there is a real Nicholas who is doing this. They're not doing it to ruin your day. They're doing it so, the integrity of the project, and like it makes sense for the entire user base, not just one person. I can't remember who said this long time ago. Something about there are not enough forks of projects. I can't remember who did it, but it makes so much sense. And I've done like a lot of the PRs that I submit. If I'm submitting to an open source project and I know it's something that's kind of niche, I always write, listen, if this doesn't make sense, this can happily live in my fork forever and ever. And I will continue to use it, and I'll find other ways to contribute to the project. But just because it's what I want doesn't mean it's what's best for the project as a whole. So don't be afraid to make your forks, people. Like, that's the beauty of open source.
One of the tools we use internally is called Branchlet. It's made by a really cool open source guy. But I started off using it, and then I made like 15 PRs to this guy's thing by hand, right?
Wow.
I felt really bad. I was like, oh, here's a small feature I want to add. Oh, here's a small feature I want to add. Here's a small feature I want to add. And finally, I messaged on the issues and was like, okay, here's all these issues. Here's all these things I added. I can make one big PR, or I can just have this live in a fork forever. But I gave him a list of all the features I added, and he just went and used his agent to code it himself. And for me, that's no harm, no foul, right? Like,
exactly.
He can do it how he wants to do it. I just want the feature to work. And it's okay to have forks, right? It's encouraged. It's what makes code good, and what makes GitHub so alive.
Speaking of GitHub, of course, the place where these things are happening. And boy, do we have a lot of work to do. And the team has been working really hard to, I know definitely you're part of our maintainer group. So these conversations are happening. You're like under NDA, you see things that people don't get to see. You see the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And we've been working a lot on features that are limiting like those interactions for new contributors, because that has been a great source of pain for maintainers too, right? A lot of people are like just delighted that they now have the power to contribute to projects that maybe it wasn't their stack, or maybe it wasn't something that was within their expertise purview, but with the power of LLMs, now everyone can learn and contribute. So you track this stuff very closely. Can you share a little bit about how you're thinking about these limitations, just from your point of view and the maintainership of this project?
Yes, absolutely. So we track it very closely. I'm going to give you some quick tips for other maintainers on how to track this.
Please.
There's this website, maintainers.github.com. You got to go there. You got to sign up. You got to join the community if you're a maintainer of any project that's pretty big. Big is like relative, right? We have over 100,000 stars, so you don't have to be quite that big, But maintainers.github.com, so useful, right? It gets you all the connections you want at GitHub for things. And there's a project under that exists around maintainers, which is called the Tiny Wins Project, which basically every single Friday GitHub comes out with new small wins for devs, right? I've had a couple that I've requested that have started getting through. But one of the ones that they're working on is how to help limit the number of interactions from new users,
Hmm.
right? And I'm not going to tell too much about this because NDAs, don't know what's covered. But they're always so receptive. And if you're having issues with this, reach out, right? Like if you're a project of a size that is getting these kind of pull requests, there's a private community for help with peers, right? Like that's where I learned about all this stuff, right? And where I share it. For Maintainer Month, that's how I know it's happening. But there are tons of things that they've added, stuff around security, stuff around what shows up. Disabling issues, for example, is now a thing you can do, right? There's 1,000 different things you can do, and they're adding more by the day. And I cannot stress enough how cool some of these things are. I can't talk about them, but they're really cool.
Yes, there is hope, friends. So definitely please join the maintainer community. You just gotta log in and submit, and then you're part of this network of people that are not only participating actively in the way that the platform is shaped for your own, it's for you. Like honestly, this team cares so much about maintainers, and we want open source projects to stay in GitHub, and we want these projects to be able to use the platform the best possible way. So if you want your voice heard, you're a maintainer project, come join this community. Besides like the amazing camaraderie, like you have such a group bunch of people there. So it's really a great place to be. So join. Maintainer Month is a good month to join. Go by. I dropped the link on the comments and I'll put it on the show notes later as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that as well. Let's talk a little bit about the way that you're triaging and filtering PRs, because you use Autopilot to do this. So what does that look like in practice? Like, how does it work?
In practice, it's very different depending on what we're trying to do, right? So Autopilot is AutoGPT's built-in chat. Chat is like a very underestimation of Autopilot. Autopilot is like a virtual business partner almost, right? It's not necessarily a code assistant, but it's more of like a thought partner that can handle real complex workflows. And we use it for stuff like go pull all the PRs, right? All 150 of them, and go check which ones matter. So which one should I integrate next and merge next, or which ones are ready, which ones aren't, and build me filters and stuff like that, right? That I can use dynamically, and it integrates with MCP and stuff like that via linear, or it can just integrate with GitHub via our block system, right? It's pretty flexible. And it lets me go and see, okay, cool, I want to merge PRs from like new contributors, right? That's a big thing I do a lot of, is say, hey, I want to go look at new contributor PRs, because I always like to help those ones merge faster, right? Because I like the idea of helping people have their first contribution on GitHub be good, right? And waiting 3 months for a contribution is not a good feeling.
No.
So we try really, really hard to keep the contribution time down if you're a first contributor. And if you have a PR that's open on our repo, there's probably a reason why we haven't replied. And I'm very sorry. So we use it to filter that, right? And I can just say, go give me all the PRs that need first contributor, like that are the first contributors, and it'll come back with a list. And then I can say, prioritize it, and it will.
That's amazing. That's a great use of the tool to build the tool. I want to take a moment to share, because you actually bring us like a really fun offer from AutoGPT, and I want to make sure we share it, because as people are listening to the things that you're doing, I'm sure they want to also try it. Can you tell us what this is? Like, what do I get?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are launching our cloud-hosted platform soon, right? Right now, you can run it yourself on your computer. But setting up AutoGPT is like very complicated, because it's a tool that integrates with so many other things. There's 1,000 API keys you need to get. There are from like Google to GitHub to Linear to Twitter, right? A lot of these keys are also locked behind very, very complicated to get paywalls or complicated systems. Like to get a Gmail key, for example, you have to go get like certifications to be able to log into Gmail, right? So that, or you need to do it through pretty insecure means, to be blunt. So our platform we host is going to be launching soon. And we wanted to give the people who listen to this podcast a discount off our launch price. And that's what this link is going to. It's a form to fill out so that when we launch, we can email you and you'll get that discounted price for the first month, and you can try it and see if you like it. And of course, you can always run AutoGPT on your own, on your computer.
Local always.
With your own, right? That's always the goal. With your own API keys. Our goal is to democratize AI for everyone, right? Whether that is you as somebody on this podcast, me as a developer, or our parents who don't know a lot about AI, but just have things they need done, right? So our goal is to make it easy for everyone. Our cloud platform is more associated with making sure that anybody can use it, right? Because most developers can set up our tools locally, but it's kind of complicated. Use Docker Compose.
And time consuming, honestly. Like right now, who has time for that?
Right.
It's better to just get it done. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's very generous. Thank you to AutoGPT for bringing that offer to us here. So if you're watching this, save that link, gh.io/AutoGPT, and drop your email address so they let you know once the cloud offering is up, and you get a fun discount. Thank you for that. I wanted to make sure we mentioned that because that is important. I want people to be able to use the tools for sure.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing also within your contributors too. So because you have a system where if people are doing the same things like creating blocks, you created this really impressive guides really to help people know exactly how to do it, what not to do. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the things that I thought was going to be so helpful initially, but didn't really turn out to be super useful. And we spent a ton of time on these docs until we added agent files to help people discover them. Even if people are coding them by hand, they use agents to like discover how to explore repo now. So AutoGPT works off a block-based system, right? So if you want to add support for Linear, which is a project management tool, you would make a block for it, right? And that is a pretty complicated thing to do. It makes you code and like figure all of that out. So what we've done is we set up a bunch of guides on how to do that. And those exist on agpt.co/docs. And I think that one is /platform/new_blocks. Don't quote me on that. But it's a guide that we also taught the LLM how to use. Great. We do that for almost all of our docs. A lot of them are embedded into the agent itself so it can improve itself. So now, for example, if you want to say, hey, and I'll give you an example I did like yesterday. We have a subreddit, AutoGPT. It's not necessarily like a mainstream communication platform for us, but I noticed we were getting a lot of spam on it. So I told Autopilot, our agent, to go and make blocks for that. And it opened a PR and against itself to improve it, to say, hey, okay, cool, now we can post to Reddit, but we got spam on one of our release nodes. So using these docs, we have made it to where the agent can improve itself pretty easily by just telling it the docs exist. And that's, I think, one of the coolest things about being open is being able to say, hey, here's this thing I don't like. And I think OpenClaw does this really well too, is say, hey, I don't like this thing. Improve yourself and open a PR, right? That's such an important facet of how to interact with these agents, and such a differentiating factor of agents that are public is like, hey, here are all these things I don't like about it. Fix it, right? And the agents are competent enough now to do it themselves. And so we can have them do it, which is really interesting. It took a lot of work to make docs like this, but it works really well.
That's great. So you're adding sort of like that customized for agents way of the writing the documentation to where they can actually like improve on their own.
And it's written for people, but read by agents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Which is a very different thing to like an agents.md file, right? Those are written for agents by like intended not to be really read by people, whereas there's some things that are intended to be read by people primarily. So they have a lot more hand holding along the way. But your agent can still use them, right? There's no reason they can't.
I love that. And we're going to take a look later, as well as maybe we can share the links as you're showing us, because I think people definitely want to see like what blocks look like in action. Yeah. They're like thinking how they can apply this to their own practices. Let's talk a little bit about text coverage, because that's also a big part of the requirements that you have for contributions to your project. You have now skills in the repo for writing tests, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about skills for tests, like that approach? And it just feels like you are kind of training contributors to the standards of the project, which is brilliant. Could you tell us a little bit about why, how?
Yeah, absolutely. We use CodeCov to check our test coverage. And CodeCov is awesome. They're with Sentry now. And Sentry has really, really generously helped our repo with a lot of different stuff over time. And so is CodeCov. But one of the things that CodeCov does is it says it can break down by directory or by project or by flag or whatever your test coverage, right? So we have done a lot of work into saying, I want more end-to-end tests to cover these things, or I want more back-end tests that are just straight up unit tests, right? And each one of these things has a required percentage for your change. And a lot of people don't put the effort in to get the best results out of this. But what we have is these are blocking change, like blocking requirements. So whenever somebody wants to merge their PR and they're like, hey, why isn't this merged yet? Or their agent checks on it after it opens it, after a couple minutes, it'll see, oh, I don't have enough tests. I cannot merge this. Right. And it's just like another little trick along the way to make the AI realize I need to write tests, right? And so it's manually tested at this point by the time it opened the PR. And now it's going to add test coverage. And when it goes to add the test coverage, it'll load the skills again. And it'll say, oh, cool, you need to add adversarial tests as well, right? Because it starts trying to figure out how to get through all these different things and see, okay, I got to check all these little boxes. So having like an extensive CI is very important for testing, and making sure these agents behave.
That is a really clever use of it, like dynamically happening in the CI, and then the agent itself figuring out what's missing, why I'm not passing, and then creating the test if it's a test that's missing. I appreciate that. Folks, take notes. We're going to talk about gotchas too. You're going to give us like a list of things that you definitely lived through, like the pains. Another topic that's really hot right now, especially because of agentic workflows happening in a lot of repositories, is licensing. And that's something that you've also thought about a lot. And you require a CLA. It's an MIT project, but you require a CLA. And if I understand it correctly, like this is not a legal thing, but it's more a way for you to sort of signal. Like, I guess a little bit of both. But could you tell us why? Like, and how you came about that decision?
So our projects actually dual license depending on the folder.
Okay.
So it's a little more complicated, but even for MIT projects, I think you should do this, right? Agents are really, really bad at signing CLAs, like really bad. So we use a CLA license bot that requires you to click a button and type your name. Super simple.
Okay.
And for ours, that covers our butt legally, but it also covers to make sure that they follow our code of conduct. What this does, though, and we have this as another check in our CI, is say a person interacted with this thing at some point. Because your agent's not going to know how to sign the CLA correctly, right? It requires you to open and OAuth with GitHub, all kinds of stuff that require a browser. And for that, you have to have interacted manually with it. So if your CLA is not signed after a week, we just close the PR, right? You haven't interacted with it personally, and we'll close with a comment that says, sign the CLA, reopen when you're done, smiley face. But that tells us you didn't interact with this PR. You're, as a human, you let your agent go do it, and that's okay. But I think all projects should start doing this. This is one of the biggest gates that helps us identify the level of buy-in and whether or not it's worth fixing it or interacting with this PR. And the CLA can be for anything, right? Like it doesn't have to be a CLA. It could be would you agree to the code of conduct, right? It doesn't matter what your project makes it. Just make it a checkbox that requires GitHub OAuth on a different page than GitHub. And that's like a huge thing. Agents are just really bad at that. And they're not going to get better because people don't want agents to just run their browser logged into their GitHub account. Like, that's a bad idea.
Yes, indeed.
And most tools refuse to do it, right? Because they know that signing into random things with your GitHub account is a terrible idea. But for large projects like ours, it helps us ensure that people are people, right? And the bot accounts, we can manually, like, if, for example, if we have bot accounts or like we have a tool called Auto, which is our internal name for autopilot, that we say, hey, can you, like, we have it open to PRs on its own. And we can just bypass the CLA for that as the like the owners of the repo. But as somebody who's contributing, it's really, really helpful to know if somebody's a person. And you don't want this to be a roadblock for anything really past the first time. Because when somebody's shown that they're a good contributor and will generally read their PRs, they generally do it every other time, we've noticed. But having that little checkbox just being like, I'm a person, actually, pinky promise, but not labeled that way has been really helpful.
That's very clever. I think I need to go back and look at my projects and do that for like even the MIT ones. That makes complete sense. There's obviously you have tooling that you're using for day-to-day, like for your PR triage or release notes, things like that, autopilot or auto, like you call it internally. A lot of those things, I guess, most developers don't really think about, like tool territory type things. But there are other things that go into maintainership of projects that might not be like developer specific. So like, what are some of the non-developer stuff that you've done to help manage the level of contributions that you get?
Yeah, I can go ahead and try and show y'all one.
Yeah, let's see it.
Done.
Yeah, let's
Let me
see
go ahead
it.
and present. Share my screen. So one of the things we had to do recently is we made a release. We do it every Wednesday. So I wanted to post about it to my Twitter and our subreddit. So I said, hey, go pull the latest release, right? And it goes and pulls all the details from it, right? And then drafts it. I never want to write these, right? We haven't posted them in months because I don't want to write them. But with our tools, we can, I realized, I was just sitting down thinking about it, like, man, I never post these. And I was like, wait, I can automate this with our tools. So I set it up, and you're getting a preview of our platform. So ignore some of the stuff going on, like my little cowboy emoji there. But it then drafts, oh yeah, you see demos, they never work. It drafts a bunch of stuff, right? And it's like, okay, cool, I like that. And it iterates on it because I don't want to write this document, right? I don't want to go and draft it. So then it goes, and we're about to open Twitter up. Let's see how bad this goes. And it goes and drafts it and publishes it, right?
What? All from your platform. So you're not
all for our platform.
That is very cool.
And it does all the OAuth handling for Twitter, which is like a very complicated thing to do now because their API is paid and there's a bunch of stuff you have to do. And then it'll also draft the Reddit. We go and just post it, right? And you can see it posts it, right? And I don't want to do these tasks, and I want to do these tasks normally, you know? Like, it's just not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, no, save your time. So you focus your time on the things that actually need your brain power, honestly.
Exactly. And now that I've done that once, I can just go tell it, hey, every week, just post again, right? And it'll do it, right? And using tools to do these things for you automatically is a really big deal. We also use it for some of our non-dev tasks too, like drafting our emails to some of our beta participants.
Okay.
Our PM, John, for example, saw the emails I was sending and said, Nick, you're really bad at writing emails and you're even worse at designing them. And he's so nice. And I make him sound like
He
like
was
a
giving you
horrible
some
guy here.
honest, constructive feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So he used our tool to rebrand them from the ground up, and it's just like, hey, but it looks like this now. Can you change our email format to this? And it took me 10 seconds. And John's a PM. He doesn't know how to code, but it took me 15 seconds because all of our repo knew how to treat it. Our tools know how to treat our repo, and it knows how to render this HTML that an email will get. And so he was able to contribute as a PM and say, hey, here's this thing I want to do. And that's not worth your time doing, right? Because for me, it was like, it's a huge effort to go do a bunch of design back and forth. For him, it's just like, I just want to improve this small thing. And it took him 10 seconds. And all I had to do was hit approve because he could show me a picture of it, right?
And now you have this fully automated sort of like release pipeline for these emails that
exactly
look pretty and you don't have to bother with. I love that. What else are you handling like with these automations? Like I take it you probably get a lot of feature requests, a lot of chatter.
Yeah, we do a lot of automations like that. Some of them are more like small business oriented, right? Because we're technically a small business, fun fact. So it's outreach and sales is a lot of it. And that stuff our CEO uses. His parents actually use it a lot. Both of our CEO's parents are artists. Yeah. So he grew up in a house filled with art, which is really cool. But they use it a lot for reaching out to potential clients and like prepping, because they both do very like, they're painting artists. I don't know what the technical word that is, but they both paint. And they use it for client communications. I use it for managing my inbox, right? I get 3 million emails from like people because my emails on GitHub so prominently, right? We're one of the more big repos on GitHub. So I get a ton of emails from that. That people are just going by and they're like, oh yeah, we'll email this guy for a potential client. And I use it for filtering all that hooked up to our Gmail, and just so many different ways you can just improve your life by doing the things you don't want to do that are like running, like related to running a business or doing admin work for your business, right? Whether it's design like John was doing or managing your inbox, right? One of our CEO uses it for a customer support agent, right? So it will receive all these emails, right? Read the customer support inbox and go, okay, cool. Here's the ones that matter. Here's the ones you need to manually reply to. Here's the ones I already know about how to reply. It's this problem we have, right? That's ongoing or whatever. Or it's somebody asking for access to the beta. I'll add them to that list. All kinds of things like that, right? And it's replaced so many different paid tools for us. That's been kind of surprising, right? There's all these SaaS products that exist that as a small business would get really overwhelming to pay for. But when you have an AI agent that can just do the slice you need and that's it, sometimes that's really great, right? It's just one product that does this one problem solving. For example, we use Discord as our team, and we have one that takes all of the like feedback form submissions and just posts it in our Discord, right? Tiny little agent. But to hook that up normally would be big about like a huge amount of work. You got to hook into Discord. You got to hook into, we use Tally, and like you got to build code to do that. Or you can say, hey, agent, when we get a new Tally thing and this spreadsheet, just put it here. Post it in Discord, right? But there are a bunch of gotchas that I want to talk about before we run out of time.
Yes, please. Let's talk about this, because you have shared a lot of the things that can make us work better and easier, but there, I'm sure, technical gotchas and problems and things that you've been through and seen. So please take it away with those.
Yeah, I'm going to speed run these a little bit because I think we're a little short on time. So I'm going to say, first off, agents marking review, like threads that you comment on as fixed without fixing them is like a huge issue.
Really?
Yeah, there's a bunch of agents out there that will just mark everything as resolved without actually acknowledging the fact that you opened it. We use CodeRabbit, we use Sentry, and a couple others for automatic reviews for like security and stuff like that, like GitHub's security bots. And there's some tools that will just resolve everything. So we require them to put a commit SHA in the reply before resolving it, or we don't merge it. Super simple, and you should require that for all your replies that are done by agents. And you can tell if they're done by agents based off the talk we just had. Then we had a problem with GitHub's GraphQL API.
You and a lot of other people.
So our problem was a little different than some other people's.
Okay.
We used it too much. Not like GitHub's down or anything like that, but we
like the
use
limits,
a lot of
right?
agents. Yeah, we hit the limits.
Of course.
But you can make a GitHub app and authenticate with the GitHub CLI using the app. And when you do that, it's a lot easier to get more requests, right? Because as an individual developer, you're just limited to a pretty small number of requests per hour. But as an app, you're allowed to get more, right? And you can request increases if you can prove that you're actually using it and not just like trying to clone GitHub as a whole, right? And that was something that was huge that we had no idea about. Is all of our tools were using the CLI to interact with GitHub, but we were hitting all these rate limits. So that was a huge deal. Writing bad Claude files is worse than not writing a Claude file at all. That was a huge deal. We started off by adding Claude files to basically every directory, and then agent files by extension. But it turns out that that pollutes context and causes the agent to focus on that thing way more than it should. So we found that having no files is sometimes a lot better. So that was kind of surprising, is if you're getting poor behavior, check the behavior of that, like check what's in that file and make sure it's not just nonsense. And then, of course, Dependabot. I don't know if y'all use it. You should. It's a good security feature. Dependabot is amazing. But one thing you can do is set up an agent that goes and tests the PR, right? Goes and checks, hey, what are all the different things that are in it? And for that, you can say, all right, here's these 15 dependency changes. They all got burnt 30 versions or whatever, right? Some of these tools release very quickly. What's all the breaking changes? And in Dependabot, it's not always easy to tell what changed between versions, right? Not everybody publishes a change log or publishes good release notes, but agents can go read every change. And doing that's really been helpful for us. So those are the more technical ones. There's then the social side of the gotchas you got to watch out for.
Okay.
I think these are like super, super big for maintainers. You don't have to accept every PR, right?
Say it louder for the people in the back.
You don't have to accept every PR. Yes. The effort for merging a PR with the LLMs is asymmetric, right? You have to do a lot of the work. You have to do the upkeep. And it's okay to close it and say, I'm just going to do it myself, right? If you like the idea, and the guy from Branchlet I was talking about earlier did this, and I was perfectly happy with it, right? There's no reason you have to accept every PR. It's sometimes not a good fit. But if you say that and like, hey, I'm not going to accept this PR, I'm just going to do it myself, there's a couple options you can add too. You can add co-authors on GitHub and say, hey, this person helped.
Yes.
Right. Because for a lot of people, what matters we've talked with is not that their code is merged, but one that the thing they want fixed is fixed. Like that's a big deal. And two, sometimes they want the contribution credit.
Yes.
Right. And especially with a large project like ours, we have like 800 contributors, right? So for us, adding another contributor is not like a huge deal, right? We're not trying to gatekeep who's a contributor in the list or whatever. It's just like, yeah, if you have a good idea, you can contribute. Adding a co-author is basically free. And really, really helps people internally, right? Like it feels good to be a co-author on NPR, even if the maintainer completely rewrote it.
Yep. Yeah,
So
I think a lot of times you just want to make sure like, oh, like I brought this idea, so I don't care how I get done because it's gonna solve my problem. But it'd be nice if you say, hey, by the way, Nicholas, thanks for that idea.
Exactly.
I see that before also where people just add your handle to your like the change log if it's not co-authoring, just like making that recognition, adding to contributor list. Like it's so nice. That is very nice. That's a really good tip. I like that.
100%. And I think it's really helped us acknowledge these people, right? Because we wouldn't be where we are today without our community, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're huge, and we're that because of the community. We like that has helped us become this, right? I like to say we built this community, but realistically, they built us. And that's the same for every open source project, right? You can go to events and do marketing and stuff, but at the end of the day, the people who contribute to your project make you your product.
100%.
And then there are people who are just contributing in bad faith. Like, you can just close those PRs. If somebody like made a slop PR and generated it in 10 seconds, close it. They didn't spend any time on it. Why should you? Right? This is how I feel about the PRs that don't sign our CLA, right? And how if you make something like that, you should feel. If they don't have the effort to do that, sorry, right? Everybody who wants to sign it but needs to go talk to their company or whatever, comments and says, hey, I'm working on signing this. Don't close my PR, please, and we won't, right? We'll wait however long it takes, but don't let it turn something you love into something you loathe, right?
Wow.
That's a big deal, right? Like the flood of them is real. We used to get a lot of PRs from Claude code, like on the web, because AutoGPT appears at the top of the list of repos whenever you have it connected to GitHub if you've started or forked the repo. So people would attach their idea into our repo and make that a PR because they didn't really understand how Claude code worked. And closing that PR is okay, right? Like, that's fine. You don't have to worry so much. And then, but the PRs that do matter that aren't quite hitting the mark, I got to say again, it's really okay just to add them as a co-author, right? They just want to be recognized for the work they've done. It doesn't matter if you include their work or just recognize them,
That's an excellent tip. Tell us about, because you've taken like a super incredible approach. Like, we all kind of do things to like scratch our own itch or like to fix our own problems. Like you said, if somebody's contributing, it's likely because they wanted to perform in a way that's going to help them. And you've done a lot of that, like building tools for your specific problems. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, that's what pr.agpt.go is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's a tool we built for internal that will clone your PR locally and go and test it end to end using UI and upload screenshots, right, to the PR. And we started off by building this on OpenClaw as just like a thing on my computer, or technically a VM, because I don't think you should run OpenClaw on your computer directly. We're not going to do architecture and security.
Nicholas with all the bangers today. My goodness, I'm making so many t-shirts from this conversation.
But we started off by making an OpenClaw bot that just, hey, will you start this thing? And will you run this PR? And then will you take screenshots? And then will you build a team of agents to do this, right? And we built tools that would do this automatically because we realized we were spending so much time going through and saying, hey, this thing, I need to test it, but I don't want to clone it down locally because that takes time and I need to run it. But it's a UI change, right? Like on this random page that's not really going to affect any behavior. I just need to make sure they didn't totally mess up a class and like throw off the layout. So we started off by just generating the UIs and like running them and like having the agent go to that page. And then while building that, we decided, okay, cool, this is really cool. OpenClaw is kind of unpredictable, right? This is one of the problems we had with our classic AutoGPT is when you give an agent a sandbox and let it go do what it wants to do, sometimes it does what it wants to do, you know? So we swapped it to the Claude SDK, right? And it's important to remember none of these tools are like have to be the tool, right? You can try a new tool and you can change it, right? We have LLMs that can write code and translate between tools faster than you can. So moving from OpenClaw to the Claude SDK was not hard and allowed us to get a little more pipelined, right? So that, okay, cool. Now it pulls down the code, spawns a bunch of different agents that review it for product fit, right? So it connects to our linear roadmaps and says, hey, this is like completely against the roadmap. Like, what? Don't do this. You know, where, for example, if somebody wanted to add those changes that where it's like a whole new product inside of our repo, right? That agent would go, this is just insane. We're not doing this, right? And we'd have ones that were checking the test coverage and the quality, right? And that would go, okay, cool, I like this test. And then at the end of a whole 8 different agents that all did slightly different things, and they all had their own prompts, we had the UI reviewer, which job was to start up the entire code base stack, top to bottom, take screenshots using Agent Browser, right? The same tool we run on your computer whenever we tell it to whenever we convince your LLM to test it locally. Take screenshots and upload it to the PR using Cloudflare, right? And it will take it and say, here's this page I navigated to. Here's the look. And for a lot of PRs, that's sufficient, right? Now we are a client-based app that can show visually the changes, but you can apply similar things and say, hey, your reviewer could say, hey, write code to test this new feature of our library, right? And if you sufficiently sandbox that, right, we put it in E2B sandboxes and walled that off so that they can't like get our keys and stuff like that. You can basically say, hey, I want to be able to test all of this, right? And do it, right? And get a report back that says this doesn't work before you spend any time on it, right? Now, this goes into one of our gotchas, which that can cost a fortune.
Yeah.
So we don't run that tool very often. We used to run it on every single PR, but now we run it mostly on PRs that are small or PRs that are very large, because it's really good at both ends of the spectrum, right? Where I want it to go and test everything. It may take it 2 hours, but that's 2 hours I'm working on something else, right? While it's doing it in the background. And that's great, right? Because I can say, go test this PR, and I can come back to a report that says this PR works fine, and then it's worth it for me to clone it locally, right? And you can build all kinds of tools like that, right? We set up a CI fix to fix itself. This turned out to be a nightmare for security for such a large project that we're not going to super get into, but there's no like locally, for example, we do the same process where you and our agents follow it, where you commit, you check the CI, and it goes, hey, you failed these 5 things, go fix them, right? One of the things we tested, and kind of as a gotcha with GitHub Actions that you should talk about, is we just made Claude Code go fix it, right? Okay, here's the 5 things, run Claude Code in GitHub Actions, right? That's a supported thing. You can do it with Copilot. GitHub Actions has inference now via models. So you can say to a model, go identify the problem here and comment on the PR.
Those models are so good at fixing the problems with those with action runs. Like it's unbelievable. Like I'm so happy I never had to bother with YAML ever again. Like I'm never writing a workflow for an action ever.
Right, exactly. And we're planning on rewriting this to use GitHub models. So it's a lot more secure because we were just using Claude Code directly and authenticating via that. And that has some weirdness with token theft that you can do. But there are, like GitHub Actions has AI inference built in. Just use it and say, hey, here's the failures after it fails. And if any of your CI fails, go figure out why and comment, right? And that's really helpful, right? But we turned that off because we didn't love the fact that it was commenting so much. It turns out we're kind of bad coders. And our CI fails a lot. And a bot that tells you why your CI failed all the time doesn't feel super awesome. But that's the cool thing about all these tools. You don't have such a commitment to them anymore, right? Yes. You can say, hey, I can experiment on this thing and try it, right? The Reddit post thing that we talked about earlier where it automatically posts to Reddit. If I decide after 2 weeks I don't like that, just turn it off, right? There's not so much time needs to be spent on it anymore, right? You're not as committed to these processes. And that really ties into what I want to talk about next, which is mixing and matching these tools, right? I've talked about Auto, I've talked about Claude, I've talked about Copilot, I've talked about Codex, Cursor. We use all of them, right? Everyone on our team uses different tools. And you can mix and match them to do what you want, right? There's a lot of very generous open source tiers for tools,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Shout
All
out
you
to
have
Code Rabbit. I love Code Rabbit
right?
for that. Yeah.
And you can, like, for example, one of my favorite things to do is if you use the Copilot CLI, you can tell it to work adversarially. Like, I think it's slash adversarial or something like that. Is a skill where it's just like, hey, have Claude argue with Codex until it comes to a conclusion on what's a good plan. It's like, pin these things against each other, right? Like, and they're so useful. But if they stop being useful, stop using them, right? We try new tools all the time. And you don't need to keep using a tool that doesn't work for you, right? It's not like for paid as a customer where it's like, oh, but we paid for a 2-year subscription as a contract. It's like, no, if you're open source, just stop using the tool, right?
Exactly.
Half the time they want you to use it for advertising. And if you stop using it, well, that's bad advertising. Like, that's worse advertising for them. So they'll make it better. And maybe you can try it again later. Or maybe it just doesn't fit your workflow. We tried a tool, I think it's called Graphite or Greptile or something like that. It was a really cool tool. Works really, really well for the OpenClaw repo. But it required a level of teaching and like setup that just don't have time for to get good. But they did, because they started using it from the beginning, right? Like, our code base is huge. But it didn't work for us. So we removed it.
Yeah.
But a quick little security, because we were part of the Secure Open Source Fund.
Oh,
That I got to point out, if y'all stop using your GitHub app, remove it from the authorized apps. So serious. Don't let an authorized app just hang around. One of the biggest things we learned.
Do a little audit right now after this stream and go see what you have. You'll be surprised. No, this is so real though. Like, because you never reviewed. Like, it's become such an innate thing to log in using GitHub. Yeah. So
exactly.
So you don't
always
realize it. Yeah. Always check. And now there is a ton of layers. Like, it used to be like there wasn't as much flexibility. Like, there's a lot of apps that they don't need to have read and write access. They don't need to. And when you're allowing things to use your auth, like, you are responsible for that. So
exactly.
Make sure that you are only authorizing what's necessary for you to accomplish what you're trying to do. So that's very, very important. Oh my gosh, Nicholas, this has been so, we covered a ton of ground. Like, okay. You brought up a point about time, and I know we're going over time, and thank you so much for being so gracious. I messaged you on the private chat. I was like, can you stay a little longer?
Yeah, absolutely.
You brought up about time, and like, I think we all sort of like fall into that sunken, like the invested time theory. Like, you don't want to like quit something even if it's not working, because we've been trying to use this thing, but I love that, like, just cut ties, be done. If it's not okay for your workflow, if it's not okay for your project. But thinking about like the economics of AI contributions, right? Where sometimes things are like costing you more time to review than they would be just to build them yourself. Like, can you share a little bit about what you think about that?
Absolutely. So there's a ton of tools that help with this. Some projects handle it to where you're only allowed to open issues and the maintainers will implement it, or you're only allowed to open issues with like a spec of what the feature you want is.
Yeah.
Right. We don't go that far, but I totally get why those projects do that. Like, it makes a ton of sense. What we do is we allow you to open any PR, but you're not allowed to claim an issue. So 4 or 5 people may open a PR against the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
And we will tell our tools, go find all related PRs to this issue and pick the best one. And we'll merge that one and add everybody and try to add everybody else as a co-contributor. Right. Some of them are kind of sloppy and those don't usually get added as a co-contributor. But if it's like good faith effort to solve the problem, well, awesome. But there is so much asymmetric work for a lot of this that it's important that you remember what takes time as part of your workflow, right? For us, coding is very fast because we build agents, right? Like we know how to use them really well. For you, that may not be true, right? Getting the contribution may be more important, right? Or maybe you want to manually fix PRs, or you want to have agents do it, right? Like identify what's important for the contribution flow for what you want as a maintainer and focusing on that, right? For me, I like having a stack of PRs. I can just go and pick the one I like, but for a lot of people, that's really overwhelming. Seeing 150 PRs every day is quite stressful for a lot of people, right? And like a lot of the times, that's all I do for a day is I go and review PRs. But it's like a motto for our team that code unmerged is code unwritten. Because if it's not merged, it's not usable. And if it's not usable, it's not written. So spending a day reviewing PRs for us is a good use of time. For some people, that's not as good a use of time because you may not have a whole team of people coding, right? You may be really overwhelmed. In that case, maybe only allowing issues to be created is a good idea. And then you can select among those issues what you think is a feature worth doing and just do it yourself, right? Pick what you like to do as a maintainer and do it, right? That's how you keep the burnout away. It's so easy to say, oh man, AI is taking all of our jobs, and it's changing it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But as the maintainer of a project, you have a lot of choice in how you maintain your project, right? I like to review PRs. Like that's a thing I enjoy. Several members of my team, I think, would rather do a lot of bad things to happen to them rather than
they would rather
PRs.
not.
I'm trying to keep them a good example. Yeah. But I'd rather get sprayed by a skunk than review 10 PRs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, right? For them, they go pick issues and assign them to people. You got to work with what works for you. And you got to remember that you're the programmer and AI is a tool. And the sharper you make an axe, the better it works. And if you leave it dull and rusty and someone else picks it up, don't be surprised if they act like a butcher and hack apart your tree for 45 minutes. Like, you got to make the tools work well for you. And what works well for you is different for every project. I've told you a little bit what works well for our project, but for every other project, it's different, right? And you got to acknowledge that, right? You got to
Absolutely. These are all
ideas,
right? Like you share, you're trying through. These are things that through your own pain points from the increased contributions because of agents. You have a system now, it works for you. If you want to maintain an open source project and you're seeing this now and you're thinking, you know what, I think this is a good idea. I'm going to go back and make sure that my agent files are what they're supposed to be. Like maybe there's a way for me to automate things so other people can contribute. Like I love the story about your PM actually being able to contribute in a technical way by using the tools. Like I think it's so easy to like pile on the negative that we sometimes miss actually, that there can be a lot of positive. If you remember what Nicholas is telling you here, that you control the way that you maintain your project. No agent is going to come in and maintain your project for you unless you allow it to, you set it up the way you want to, or you don't. You continue reviewing PRs like Nicholas does because he likes it, which...
Yeah. You can turn off PRs entirely for your project, right? That's one of the tiny wins that the Tiny Wins team did.
That was such a big thing. Yes.
Yeah. And for the people who just want issues, that's perfect. That's awesome, right? Don't even have to deal with it. You just make the change yourself, right? There's projects like, I think SQLite doesn't accept contributions externally, but they accept bug reports. That's perfect for them, right? They're a team that's decided they don't want your code changes, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Like that's their project,
Absolutely. Looking into the future of what open source, like everything is changing for our profession. Everything is changing for open source. What do you think, like, where does open source go? Like, I would say, like, we were thinking, like, maybe in a year or 2 years, like, everybody's going to be working with an agent. Like, I have 3 different OpenClaw instances, one in hardware that is an old Windows, very boxed down computer, 2 in virtual sandboxes, and I'm adding a 3rd one today because I think I need to experiment with Hermes, which I have not tried it yet. I feel like everyone now has an agent or the power of an agent if you're using Copilot CLI. Like, where does open source go? What does that look
I think
like?
it's going to change really dramatically.
Yeah.
Projects like ours, I feel like are on the forefront of what this looks like because we are AI agents.
Hmm.
Us, OpenClaw, Open Code, stuff like that. They experience these changes because people are excited about the tools and use them to make them. But there's a lot of projects that haven't yet experienced things like people who don't know how to code trying to make changes to your project because they want to make it better for them,
Hmm.
right? And that's like a suite of things that you're going to have to deal with as a contributor, right? This person, you can tell them to run the test and they're not going to know what that means. And there's some level of education required. And for that, you're going to have to figure out how to handle it. And we've started doing that by teaching agents how to do these things, right? Our repo is pretty big, so it gets indexed in a lot of these different training. So that's really beneficial for us. But your project may not be that big. It may not get indexed in that training because every agent like Claude or GPT knows about our project and knows the code base, right? Because it's such a big project.
Hmm.
But your project may not have that happen. So you need to set yourself up for success and decide how you want contribution, right? Because it's really easy to make a new project, really easy. I, for example, wanted to get backgrounds from museums for Van Gogh to show up every day on my laptop on my Mac.
Oh, nice.
I had Claude build that in a day, right? And if I want to, I could publish it to the App Store and it'll work, right? It'll auto start, rotate the displays, puts it on a nice little mat. And that's a project that already exists or an app that already exists that I didn't know existed, right? So you're going to see a lot of duplicates and things where people just have an idea and now can turn it into reality
Hmm.
so quickly. And as a maintainer, how do you deal with comparisons for these things? How do you deal with the fact that the thing you're building maybe as a SaaS is one-shottable by an LLM, you know?
Yes.
Right? We talked about how we built a customer support agent, right? That's like a whole product suite. But we don't need that product suite anymore because it's such a large product suite. We only need the tiny slice of receiving an email and replying to it, you know? And we use Gmail, right, for example. But previously, you would have used a bunch of different tools to handle that and like tickets and software. And maybe one day we will. But open source is going to change a lot. There's going to be, I think, a lot of projects that grow very quickly, like OpenClaw, for example, or us, where previously GitHub got a lot of stars from people who were developers, right?
Yep.
And I think we were one of the first projects to have this happen, where the main people who start our project were not developers, right? Part of our setup guide had and star the project. And so when people were trying to set it up, they clicked the star button. And we realized that much later, that that's what was triggering it. But
That's wild.
yeah, I know. Realizing that was crazy. It's like, oh, this is just in part of the setup guide. Somebody added this as an open source contributor. And now suddenly we have so many stars. But it was crazy because people don't know how to code, right? They're going to try and set up your tool. And if you have developer only documentation, it's not sufficient, right? Like our tool is very difficult to run. I'm not going to lie to you. It requires Docker Compose, which outright just eliminates some devs who don't know how that works, right? They understand Docker, but Docker Compose is like a whole nother suite of things on top of it. Not even including the 50 API keys to make it work well with all these different services you want to work with, right? That we've gone all through all the effort of setting up for you. And that's why we have a hosted product, is because it's so difficult to set it up. But people are going to see that there's tools being built so quickly, but they're also going to be abandoned just as quickly, right? If I decide to stop having my background change, I'm not going to work on this tool anymore. I didn't spend any time making it, really. Claude did. And it cost me part of my subscription for that. But like, I already paid the subscription, And so I can just abandon it. And you'll see a lot of projects, I think, come and grow really quickly and then just get completely left behind or left with maintainers who don't really care about them that much because they moved on from the concept. And I think that'll be a very, very different thing to how people previously coded, where if a maintainer poured enough energy into it to make a project usable, they probably stuck with it for a while because they poured their heart and soul into that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be crazy.
What a time to be in this business, though. I go from days where I feel really terrible about everything, and then days like today, having this conversation, seeing how you at a scale of this incredible project are managing, not managing, you're thriving. You are making it work for you. So a lot more hopeful. I feel a lot more hopeful after this conversation. Nicholas,
Yeah.
this has been unbelievable. I think this is exactly what we needed to kick off Maintainer Month. I cannot wait to go through this transcript, and I feel like there are so many unbelievably like just nuggets that are just maintainers needed. I think we need to we need to turn this into a blog post, please. Oh no, that what happens when I say that? They say, "Well, go write it," and I will.
Right.
And I will.
You can
And
have
I will.
autopilot write it.
Yeah, exactly.
Give the transcript.
Exactly. But thank you so much, Nicholas. This has been fantastic. For everyone watching, like go to the AutoGPT repo, leave your star. Go study how they structure these agents files, because you're obviously doing it in a way that works for you and your project. And even if you're not thinking that your repository and your projects are going to be AI first, I have news for you, friends. Your contributors are AI first now. So we kind of got to. We kind of got to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nicholas, where can we follow you? Where I'm
Primarily,
yeah.
Primarily I am on X. I also have a Blue Sky, but at Nick Tindle, NickTindle. It's where you can follow me.
Perfect. Let me find that direct link so that I can share it so that folks and tell me that the handle one more time. At
Nick Tindle.
Oh, it's your name.
NickTindle. Yeah. Everywhere else but Twitter, I'm at Intindle. Unfortunately, there is an Intindle on Twitter from many, many years ago.
First of all, this logo, y'all go to Nick's Twitter right now. Right now, go to Nick's Twitter. That is so smart. I love it. That's really good. That's really good. So go follow Nick. Go to the AutoGPT repo and drop a star there, please. And then also, don't forget to take advantage of the very generous offer that AutoGPT brings us today, which you can find at this link right there on your screen, where you just give them your email. And when your cloud offering is up, if you don't want to bother yourself with setting it up, you don't have to, because AutoGPT Cloud will do it for you. So,
and we're trying to do that very, very soon.
Amazing. Amazing. Nicholas, thank you so much. It's lovely to meet you in person, kind of like
Right?
semi IRL. I will see you next week. I can't wait to listen to this conversation in that more intimate setting with the maintainers for Maintainer Month Summit. Friends, if you haven't joined the community, remember to go join the community, because lots of great things happen there. And if you are curious about what events we have for Maintainer Month, I'm going to drop that link one more time. Nicholas, thank you so much. You've been super generous with your time. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
How good was that? I feel like I learned so much about maintainership at a scale that it kind of blows our minds. Like, I am in a panic when I have a few PRs that require my assistance. This repository's got almost 150 PRs that are open, but they manage to work with agents and AI in a way that works for them. So I think that's one of the key takeaway messages that you should take back to your teams. It's okay to say no, but it's also okay to take advantage of what agents can bring to your projects. So as long as you're making it work for you, it works. Thank you all so much for being here, for hanging out with us for an hour and a half. Oh my gosh. If you don't have any other plans, stick around, because in about 30 minutes, my colleague is going to be here with the Remotion team, which, y'all, Remotion is so fun. Like, I've been having a lot of fun creating videos and things with it. So come by and get to see it firsthand. Bring your grace and your feature requests and your ears ready to learn. Don't forget to go by the Maintainer Month site, so you can take a look at all the scheduled events that are happening throughout Maintainer Month. And if you are the maintainer of an open source project and you've not joined the community, please do so. It's a good place for you to be. A lot of GitHub PMs and engineers and leadership hang out there. So if you want to help shape what this platform is for you, that's the place to be. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you being here. Special thanks to Nick and to the folks at AutoGPT for being so generous with their time. We'll catch you next week, my friends. I will be back next week. My colleague will be here in about 30 minutes with Remotion. Take care.